So draws for hunting tags in most states are over now, and it's time to actually start planning your hunt. After days of combing over satellite imagery of your tag zone, it's time to scout and plan for opening day. Whether you plan on road hunting or you're plan on hiking into the backcountry, part of your plan is likely to set up a camp or two while you're out hunting. The complexity of these camps will depend on how many people are involved, the weather, and how far from civilization you plan on venturing. Two types of hunting camps are normally used by the hunter, and these are a base camp and what's referred to as a spike camp. A base camp is a fully outfitted camp near a vehicle or a drop site, and a spike camp is a remote camp that you have to hike into and hunt from. In this video, I'll show you my setups for a base camp and a spike camp. Since I'm almost always out with my wife or out hunting with a buddy, most of my camp setups are geared towards two people. And the first thing we'll talk about is a base camp. A base camp is a full-featured camp. Complete with ice chests full of cold beer, a comfortable, roomy tent to sleep in, big camp chairs, music, and the ability to cook real meals. Base camp is set up usually where your vehicle is, or sometimes at a drop camp or a wall tent camp accessed by pack animals. In some areas, you can hunt right out of base camp. This is how I do it for a lot of my upland hunting. If you plan on road hunting, in your hunt zone, then a base camp is probably all you'll ever need. In other areas, a base camp is used before and after your hike into the backcountry to set up a spike camp. If I'm venturing into high places like up in the eastern Sierras, I'll often stay at a base camp for a day or two so I can kind of acclimate to the altitude before heading up the mountain. Remember, at 11,000 feet, you only have 65% of the oxygen that you have at sea level. So it's good to acclimate at base camp before heading up to really high elevations to hunt. So this is how my base camp usually looks, or something similar to this. For video purposes, I set it up in my backyard, so don't mind my chickens making noise in the background or some of these pissed off blue jays or doves that are flying around right now. For my tent, I prefer a big instant tent. These things are super easy to set up. And this roomy instant tent pretty much sets up in 2 minutes. I often roll into camp late, and it's awesome that these instant tents set up so quickly. This is the Core brand right here. And Beck and I have been using this tent right here for about 8 years. And it's a great tent, except that I think it has a horrible zipper design. Some of our friends use the Coleman 6-person instant cabin. And I think, I'll admit it, that's a better instant tent than this one. So I'd get the Coleman 6-person instant cabin if I did it again. But I'll put links to all of the gear that I discuss in this video in the description below. But I love a big tent like this, so I could pretty much stand up and get dressed in here, or do work in here. And if rain, mosquitoes, or yellow jackets make sitting outside miserable, you can actually set up a table and chairs in here and eat in here. You can see how roomy it is in here with 2 cots. And this base camp is built for comfort. So these are Coleman Trailhead 2 cots. And these are basically copies of the old school military cot, but I like these better than the military cots. And sometimes Becca and I use a really thick queen size air mattress, which I guess is really comfortable, but air mattresses are a pain in the ass. And these cots set up much faster, leave more room in the tent, and are a million times more durable and reliable than an air mattress will ever be. But Becca loves air mattresses. And of course, if I'm hunting with a buddy, we don't snuggle in an air mattress. We use these cots, which I like a little bit better. And for cooking, I've been using this Coleman combo grill stove for almost 15 years now. That's right, I've been using the same one for probably over 15 years now. And I think it's called the Coleman 2-in-1. I'll put a link to it in the video description below. But I will never, ever part with this thing. I can grill a ribeye and make mashed potatoes at the same time. I could fry eggs and toast muffins simultaneously. You know, you could grill a fresh caught trout and make garlic butter green beans at the same time with this thing. It's just awesome. And since the Forestry Service has been banning wood burning and campfires with more frequency, this thing has been a godsend for cooking in base camp. If you want real meals while you're camping, get this damn thing. It's worth it. And I also like these, I don't know if you saw it, these little aluminum folding tables like that. They come in really handy for everything. Sometimes I'll even cook on that thing right there. That's why it's a little bit dirty. And also you can see, you know, just for looks here, I also have my portable Rhino Tough solar bank set up right here. And that thing charges cell phones and cameras pretty quickly. And, you know, even if you're setting up base camp for comfort, I mean, you might as well bring yourself a toilet, right? But basically, this is kind of my typical base camp right here. And the second type of camp I'm going to cover in this video is what's known as a spike camp. A spike camp is like a smaller base camp, but much further away and requires walking to get to. This means that you're carrying everything you need to set up spike camp in a backpack, and you're walking miles with it. So there's no ice chests or big cots like you would have in a normal base camp. But don't confuse recreational backpacking or through hiking with the hunter's spike camp. They're not the same thing, and they actually have very little in common. A spike camp is usually only 1 to 4 miles away from your truck or your base camp. So you don't have to pack ultralight, and you can bring more comfort items with you when you set up a spike camp. So don't think ultralight backpacking when you're thinking of a spike camp. The purpose of a spike camp is to reach a more remote area away from road hunters or day hunters and set up a camp to hunt out of. Basically, it's a way to get away from people and effectively cover wilder habitat. And when you set up spike camp, you can hike back several more miles each day from spike camp without carrying all your camping gear with you, then return to spike camp later in the day to make dinner and sleep. But now, you're probably asking yourselves, Desert Dog, why don't you just hike back way further and set up spike camp? 1 to 4 miles seems kind of close. Well, the act of staying within 1 to 4 miles from your pickup truck or base camp actually has a purpose. If you shoot a deer or an elk, you have to pack out that meat and those antlers. So if you shoot an animal, you're going to have to hike from spike camp back to your truck more than once while carrying heavy loads. So if you shoot an elk, you're probably going to break down camp and hike back to your truck with your camping gear, then make 1 or 2 more trips to recover the 200 plus pounds of meat. And the farther away from your truck you set up spike camp, the more difficult this becomes. If you're in the mountains, it's also best to set up your spike camp near the top of your expected elevation gain. This way, your loadout is all downhill, so you're not packing up, up some crazy gradient with 100 pounds on your back. That could be kind of iffy. And remember, hiking downhill is not easy too. That's where people get most knee and ankle injuries. So there's a proper way to hike downhill and a proper adjustment to your trekking poles when you're hiking downhill. So I'm not going to cover that in this video. There's lots of videos that cover how to properly descend a hill while you're hiking, but be mindful of that. But it's best to set up your spike camp somewhere near the top of your elevation gain. That way, if you're packing out meat, it's all downhill. You also might need to break down your kill miles away from your spike camp itself. So, you might have to bring your meat back to spike camp, rest, and pack everything out the next day. So don't stray too far from your vehicle or base camp when you might have to pack out meat. Since I'm usually out hunting with my wife or with a buddy, this is my tent that I use for spike camp with 2 people. This tent is the REI Half Dome 3 Plus. It's a really nice tent with dual vestibules. Comfortably sleeps 2 people with a little bit of extra room. But really, you don't want some tiny bivy tent or hammock for spike camp. You're only hiking back a couple of miles, so you can afford the comfort of a little bit bigger tent, I think. During most hunting seasons, you're probably going to have to deal with bad weather, so it's nice to have a big enough tent to hang out in while you wait bad weather out. This REI Half Dome tent was only $250, and it's twice as strong as the name brand Nemo and Big Agnes tents. People brag about the Nemo Dagger having 15D nylon flies and a 30D nylon floor. Well, this Half Dome tent has a 40D nylon fly and a 70D nylon floor. It's literally more than twice as tough as the expensive ultralight brand name tents. It has way more room, and it's still under 6 pounds total. So this is a really tough tent. And when you're hunting with 2 people, you can split the weight, so each of you is only carrying less than 3 pounds. And you can see that this tent just has tie-off points everywhere around it for guy lines in case the weather gets really bad. I mean, this thing could really withstand some bad weather if you want to set it up for it. So this is a really good, versatile, all-purpose hunting tent. So this tent is the way to go for a 2-person spike camp. This tent has plenty of room for 2 people to sleep comfortably and hang out in bad weather. We love these Sea to Summit XT. I believe they're the XT Ether Light insulated sleeping pads. And we really like these things. And we're both pretty tall, so we use the large size, and I'm a side sleeper. So this thick pad, the thick Sea to Summit pad, I think was a great investment for me. I mean, it's basically the only way I could sleep comfortably on my side while I'm out backpacking. And I love how the sleeping pad, the stuff bag it comes with also operates as a pump. So you don't need to blow this thing up with your mouth. It pumps up real easy, especially after a long day of hiking. That's the last thing you want to do is blow up an air mattress. So that's pretty cool. And Becca and I both use down quilts while we're backpacking. We used to use mummy bags, but I really prefer a quilt nowadays. Since I'm a warm-blooded side sleeper, the quilt really works out for me. And I think this is a Sierra Designs 20 degree, and that's a 15 degree over there in Becca's because she gets a little bit colder than I do. But down is the way to go for warmth because it's so lightweight and it's so compressible in your pack. And these pillows are awesome too. I used to actually just use my packable, I have a down hiking jacket that actually folds into its own pocket, and I used to use that as a pillow. But these little climate pillows, I think they're called the Lux or something like that, are awesome. They pack down small and they're so comfortable. I mean, they feel almost like a pillow at home. I really like those. Now for one of the cool parts about this tent is that it has 2 doors and 2 vestibules. Oh, my chickens are getting loud now. Rosie, be quiet. And it's cool to have 2 doors and 2 vestibules, because that means if someone has to pee in the middle of the night, they basically, you're not climbing over each other. Each person has their own vestibule, and they have their own door and little personal area right here to stash their own gear. And I think if you're going with 2 people, you really need 2 doors and 2 vestibules. That's the way to go. And but any serious hunting tent needs at least 1 vestibule in my mind. You know, you could keep your packs under here, like this Kuiu 5500 Pro Light that I carry nowadays. You can even do some cooking in here. You can stash your dirty shoes outside the tent and they won't get wet or frosty. So having a vestibule is a must with me. And then we have food storage right here, in case you're wondering what this big canister is right here. Basically, just about every wild place in my state up in the mountains is starting to require backcountry campers to use a bear canister. You know, I do like hanging bags better, but my state doesn't really like them. Probably the only thing I like about this is it functions as kind of a mini table while I'm cooking, and you could sit on it and use it probably as a chair too. Because of backcountry regulations, this actually gets a lot of use in my state. You know, I keep my food, my toothpaste, sunscreen, and all of my trash in this. You know, I really like to store my food and trash in a bag and hang it using the PCT method. But these are convenient. You know, you just basically store them away, wedge them in a rock or by a tree or something like that. And, you know, it's convenient because there's no rope or gear involved with hanging a bag. And you don't have to worry about rodents chewing into your food when you have this, because this is basically rodent and possum and raccoon proof right here. So it's not only for bears, basically almost nothing can get into this. But the downside is this is very bulky. A forest ranger once told me that aggressive black bear encounters in the backcountry have fallen drastically since they started requiring bear canisters. I don't really know if that's true, but if you get a good one, like this Garcia right here, no bear, raccoon, or rodent is going to get into this thing. It's just a pain in the ass to pack, and it adds a couple of extra pounds of weight. So I don't use these bear canisters unless it's required. And my stove when I'm packing into anywhere is my Jetboil Minimo, which is way better than my old Jetboil Flash that I used to use. This thing is just a water boiling machine. Seriously, if you hunt at high elevations, you need a stove like this to get that water boiling. The fact that this boils water so fast because of its efficiency means that a can of fuel lasts a really long time with this system. So I really like this Jetboil Minimo. And these are my utensils. I really like these titanium long sporks. If you're eating out of dehydrated food containers, these things are just a must. I also, you know, might bring a titanium skillet and spatula. I believe my spatula is right there. See? I also might bring a spatula and a titanium cooking pan. You know, you never know, I might pull a trout out of one of the streams or cook some back straps from a fresh kill, and this is a great way to make a real camp meal. So I bring a little bit of that too. And lastly, I love these Sea to Summit collapsible cups. These things are just awesome. They're so light and compact, and they have no problem handling boiling water. These are perfect if you want that cup of coffee or hot cocoa in the morning before you head out. And of course, I always carry that to protect my hands from a hot pan, and this is really convenient too. So that's basically my cooking setup when I backpack. And one of the creature comforts that I absolutely must have in Spike Camp is a chair. I hate most backpacking chairs, but I like this one. It's called the Chair Zero by Helinox. And it's pricey, but I think it's the best pack chair made. If you want everyone in Spike Camp to be jealous, get yourself a Chair Zero. And these fold down real small too, and they're light. So to me, if you're camping, 1 to 4 miles back into Spike Camp, having a chair is well worth it. But what if I decide to go on a solo trip? Or what if my buddy snores like crazy or has farts that'll gag a maggot? And in that case, I'll be sleeping in a tent by myself, and I don't need a big tent like that Half Dome. My solo tent is the Tarp Tent Stratospire 2. Tarp Tent sells tents that are higher quality than the mass-produced tents like Nemo and Big Agnes, and sells them at pretty reasonable prices. And of course, once again, I have this tent set up in my backyard, so usually if I sent this up out on a camping trip, I'd have all the guy lines attached to it in really tight and taut. So this structure is really rigid. And unlike most tents, this tent doesn't have poles that come with it. You use your trekking poles as the tent poles. But this Stratospire 2 tent is under 2.5 pounds, but it really does have a huge amount of room. And it's a full-featured tent with 2 big doors and 2 vestibules in it. And like I said, it sets up with my trekking poles. And the setup time is about 5 minutes with this tent. This tent just delivers on all fronts to me. I hate most trekking pole tents because they put the poles inside the living space in the tent, or the poles kind of block the entrance to the tent. But the design of this tent solves those issues completely, and the headroom in this tent is just amazing. It's actually easy to get dressed in there. Actually, I can put my Chair Zero in there and sit down and be comfortable and eat. The only downside to this tent is that if you want to take your trekking poles hunting with you, you have to break down your tent. But when I'm carrying my rifle and I don't have a bunch of weight in my pack, I guess I really don't need trekking poles. But that's the only disadvantage to a tent like this for hunting. And I also have a footprint for this tent, but I didn't put it up right now. And most people don't buy the factory footprints for their tents. They just get a piece of Tyvek and use that. And before I start to get a lot of questions, let's talk about seam sealing on tents. I personally seal the seams on just about all of my tents, whether the manufacturer tells me to or not. But you must know exactly what material your tent is constructed of before attempting to seal the seams. Most store-bought tents are a polyurethane coated fabric, either nylon or polyester. But many high-end tents are silicone coated, and the material will be referred to as sil nylon or sil poly. And this particular tarp tent is made out of sil poly, which is a great material for this tent because it's not freestanding and it requires a lot of lashing. And polyester stretches less than nylon and is more water resistant. So sil poly is a great material for non-freestanding tents because it tends to keep it from sagging in wet weather. So when you buy seam sealer for your tent, you need to be sure that you get the right one. There's seam sealers specifically for silicone coated fabrics and specifically for polyurethane coated fabrics. Don't get the wrong one. And I basically squeeze this stuff into a little container and apply it with a small brush to the seam. And but there's many ways you can apply this to the seams. But a lot of manufacturers, and Tarp Tent's one of them, suggest that you seal the seams yourself after you buy the material. So that's what I do. And these are our packs right now that we're using. Beck and I share the load, so I usually pack hers with lighter things and mine with the heavier stuff. She's currently using an Osprey 55, which holds 3,500 cubic inches, and I'm currently using the new Kuiu ProLite 5500, which holds 5,500 cubic inches. Between the two of us, we can easily carry everything we need. I love Kuiu's ProPack system. I don't think anything on the market is more adjustable than these. And I can easily strap my tripod and a rifle to the sides of this pack. And if I'm not hunting, I can just as easily strap rod tubes to this pack instead of a rifle and do some backcountry trout fishing, which I plan to do here in a week or so. I hope you really enjoyed this rundown on what I use for base camp and spike camp. For base camp, just bring everything you want. Eat good, sleep good, be comfortable, and have a great time when you're setting up base camp. For spike camp, some people think we go too heavy, and others think we go too light or minimalist, but we do what works for us. Backpackers have a saying that goes, hike your own hike. They all use it. It basically means don't worry about what other hikers are doing or what gear they have. Do what's right for you. And I think this applies to spike camp as well. Do what works for you. But always remember, we aren't backpacking or through hiking to spike camp. You don't need to go ultra minimalist. You know, we're only going back on a day hike to set up camp, so you might as well be comfortable in doing so. Well, that's it for this video about my hunt camp setups. I hope you found it interesting and informative. Thank you for watching, and as always, good hunting.